Welcome to Healthy, Sexy Nutrition with me, Michelle Fox, culinary nutritionist, health coach, and your host for this podcast. I teach busy professionals how to get more nutrition in their bodies and how to have more fun in their home kitchens. If you struggle with consistency, or sometimes forget to make your needs a priority, or you avoid planning your meals, you, my friend, are in the right place. Join me each week for inspiration to increase your energy, discover new recipes, manage your hormonal woes, and so much more. You are a busy professional, but that does not mean your nutrition should suffer. You deserve to live in a body and have a life that you love. Let's dig in. Hello. Oh my goodness, I am so excited to share my new friend with you. Her name is Teri Slater. And let you know a little bit before we jump into this episode. Teri Slater is a financial coach who helps you clarify your goals and priorities, then helps you align your daily spending decisions to reach those goals while still having the freedom to spend on what you value. My kind of girl. Teri understands that even if you know what to do with money, human behavior can derail progress. We know this happens with eating as well. Even with a finance degree and a career helping others with money, Teri and her ex-husband had accumulated over $200,000 in debt. Yeah, that's 5 zeros in debt. It took 6 years and a lot of self-work to pay it all off and shift to a mindset that focused on financial freedom. Teri's own life experiences and commitment to personal growth have given her the ability to listen without judgment and help her clients achieve their goals. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. So, without further ado, let's listen in. Hi, Teri. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
I am good, Michelle. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this. I know it's really fun to connect with you, so I'm looking forward to our time today.
Yay. My pleasure and ditto. I know as I was talking to you about having you here on the podcast, I mentioned that I would love to share your wisdom with my community because I truly believe in whole person health.
Yeah.
As you know, I could talk 24/7 about nutrition if you let me. I might not have any friends if I do that. So, I've tried to hold it back a little bit.
Oh, that's great.
But with that, I've noticed with a lot of the participants in my programs, I will say most of us, 'cause I'll include myself, there can often be a hiccup as far as knowing that we're worthy to take that time to make those extra steps to take care of ourselves. There can also be the hiccup of what I fondly say, the excuses of saying, I'm too busy to meal plan, or I don't have enough money to buy organic. And again, we can go down that route. I'll be talking about this stuff all throughout my podcast episodes. But for you, where I find that your knowledge and know how would be helpful is just to talk a little bit more about whole person health. So, just to begin with, what is your title for one, and then what is your approach that you typically take with your clients around that?
Yeah, great question. So, I am a financial coach, and I do like to explain the difference between financial coaching versus being like a financial advisor. So, I really help people much more with like their day to day money and financial decisions and helping them to, look at anything at all that might be getting in the way of their progress of reaching their financial goals. So, typically when you meet with financial advisors, they're going to be looking at, your longer term planning for the future, for retirement, estate planning, all those kind of things where it's all very future. And then they're looking at managing investments for you. Whereas with a financial coach, I'm really digging into, again, kind of the day to day actions, if you will, that help people understand like why they behave the way that they do with money. And I know that we've talked about this, but I feel like finances and health are so closely related related because we often know what we should be doing, but why don't we do it? Like, how come we're not hitting the goals that we want? And a lot of it is just really looking at like all of these little micro decisions that we have to make on a day to day basis. So that's what I help with.
I absolutely love that. And I love that you use the term micro decisions because
Mhm.
I do like to talk about that in a lot of my programs that, yes, for optimum health, we are going to release the sugar, the dairy, the wheat. And at the same time, when somebody's coming to me, specifically my new clients, I'm not going to say we're dropping everything overnight. We're talking about, baby steps. Like, let's just try adding in more water this week and
Yep.
just checking in with our body to see how that feels.
Right.
And so, with you, when you're coaching somebody, when they're coming to you saying, I don't know, I might be thinking of Michelle 20 years ago. I've got credit card debt. I'm working, I'm saving, but how come I can't get ahead? Like, clearly, I'm thinking that's how I'd come to you. I wouldn't necessarily say I have a money problem, I don't think,
Right.
but I would
Right.
know something was off. I would see your shining face saying, "Let me help you." I mean, is that typically how people find you? Like, "We're kinda off, and I think you have some answers for me," or do people come
Yeah.
straight out and say, "I struggle with money," or "I'm bad at money?"
Yeah,
Like,
no, usually it is. It's usually people have had some kind of a pivotal moment that has been kind of like, I don't know if I would necessarily call it like a wake up call, because it's not always like a really like negative thing, but sometimes it's almost that realization of like, I don't want to continue like this, right? Like, I can't afford to like make a job change or, stay home with the kids, or, it can be decisions like that too. So the presenting problem, it's varied, and it's not always like a 911 emergency, right? It's just kinda like you slowly sort of realize that, "Ooh, all these decisions I made for a really long time are just really starting to weigh on me." Yeah, so really, at the start of it is just we really have to identify what their goals are because interestingly enough, I will have a fair amount of clients that come to me and they have debt, but to them, like, debt is not necessarily a presenting problem. It's something else. It's, "Hey, the way that we communicate about money, like, isn't good. It always ends in a fight." Or, I feel like I'm just working and working and working just to keep up with the bills and like you said, like, can't get ahead, right? So, we do have to do a little bit of a deep dive just to find out, like, if we were successful, like, if whatever the problem was were fixed tomorrow, what would that look like? What would that feel like? Because then we can start to really identify if it's bigger, bigger things that need to be tackled versus do you just need a debt payoff strategy? Because I can do that in my sleep. Like, let's write you up a plan and like, here's how you're going to, tackle the dollars and cents of it. But it often goes a lot deeper than that too. Yeah. So we just have to dig into like, what is the actual problem? And a lot of times, it's just behavior modification. But obviously I don't present it necessarily in a way of behavior modification, but it's little things. Like you said, incorporate more water into your day. Mine is like, can you take your credit cards off of like the digital wallet, right? So when you go to your computer to buy something, you have to get up, go get the card number, type it in. It slows you down, makes you think a little bit more. So I do a lot of different tools like that with folks just to kind of help them, make smaller changes.
that is brilliant.
Yeah.
I had never thought of that before. I am taking notes as you talk.
Right. Well, we have to figure out how to like break these habits. There's so much when we talk about behavior change of, instilling new habits or changing your habits, but sometimes we have to also kind of like break down the habits that we don't even know that we have, which just means putting up a barrier in front of yourself sometimes. You have to almost expect that these are the kind of things that, if somebody comes to me and they've got, a particular, like, let's just pick on Amazon, right? Like Amazon is just like, I don't even know where all that money goes. It's like, okay, so how can we address that part, right? Like take the Amazon app off your phone, get your wallet, take the credit card off of there, those kind of things. It's just little things you have to put up a barrier for yourself if you need to.
Oh, that is powerful. I want to go back to something you said a couple sentences ago, which is, what would that look like? So I love that and I might be putting words into your mouth, but what I heard you say is you would have a client envision what their money life looks like, and then you
Yeah.
work towards that.
Yeah, yeah, or it's identifying if this problem were solved, then what? Right. And so that almost kind of gets deeper at, it may not, again, it's not always that the money is presenting itself as like the primary problem, but there just might be all these other decisions that you really, it's like everything is on the table to look at. So if you say, okay, if this problem were solved tomorrow, then I would be able to, leave work at 3 o'clock on a Friday, or I would be able to, take a 3 day weekend, once a month in order to go take the family on a camping trip. And so you're getting at like, what kind of life would you be living if this problem were not present for you? Cause then we need to get you into the dreaming state, right? Cause when things feel heavy, it's really, really hard, I think, to kind of dream about what a positive future will look like. And sometimes if it feels out of reach, then you just feel kind of stuck in the trenches too. I think it's also important to say that, when it comes to money, like reaching financial goals doesn't always have to mean restriction. It doesn't mean that you have to like stop spending extra money on these things or you can't go out to eat ever. I mean, there's certain, personal finance professionals that will say, you should never be going out to eat if you're in debt. But also, if that's what brings you joy, or if that's the only time that your family connects, then go out to dinner. But you may have to look at how often you choose to do that, right? So, I don't want to tell people you really shouldn't be spending money on this, that, or the other. I want them to identify what are the core things that make them really happy and like, where are you? Because maybe you're not willing to change one thing, but you're totally willing to change something else. Somebody may rather, give up a vehicle and start riding a bike, but they would still like to be going out to eat. It's like, that's your choice. Like, you get to choose. So, envisioning what you want that like happy life to look like when this problem is solved is really important to kind of dreaming bigger.
Mm. I'm also hearing the energies of empowerment as
Yeah.
well, because
Yeah.
when I feel like I have more choices, then I feel more empowered to make the choices that work for my life.
Yeah.
So I
Yep.
absolutely love that approach.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, it's very similar to actually in some of my programs, as I mentioned, we do baby steps.
Yep.
With that said, I love this idea as far as how do I want to say it? Well, I'll back up. I will say one of the frequently asked questions is this a diet and am I going to starve?
Right.
And I'm always like, no, it's not a diet and nobody starves when they're in my kitchen,
Yeah. Right.
AKA my programs.
Right.
But what I love about what you're saying and similar to what I do is that yes, we plan out these meals and then I try to stay realistic, meaning there are going to be meals that I call blow off meals. So if it's like a dinner out with wine. Okay, if that's something you love, do that on Saturday night with your beloved, but then get right back on, Sunday
Right.
morning, Monday,
Right.
Tuesday, Wednesday. So it's the blow off meal versus the blow off day or the blow off week. And it
Exactly.
sounds like you might be saying the same with money. Like,
Yeah.
let's look at ways that I can. And actually, I'm trying to bring that home more personally. Like, what do I spend more money on? Yep, massage. That's
Oh,
that's
yeah.
my one kinda I was gonna say non-negotiable, but then I
Yeah.
think my kids might if they listen to this, they'll be like, "Yep, she's bougie."
Oh,
There
that's great.
there she is being bougie again, but I
Yeah.
will say, I don't do the other things, like, you can say I don't do my nails, I don't spend a lot on makeup, or actually, I don't really spend a lot on anything, but that's my one
Yeah.
treat that it's like it feels good
Right.
and I don't have any guilt paying for it because I know I'm saving money in the other areas. So,
Exactly, and it's, like, just kinda part of your plan, right? If you can start to look at things as, just like the one meal, right? Not a whole day, but the one meal, it's like, if people could stop telling themselves that they've, "Oh, I've fallen off track." No, no, it's like we sometimes we just you a foot can slip to the side, but you just keep walking one foot in front of the other, and so I feel like if we have the ability to not beat ourselves up for making certain decisions or, allowing yourself to kind of, just divert for a minute so that you can keep up the steam, right? Because I think that is a lot, especially in health and weight loss and journeys like that too. It's you can like drive hard, 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 but at a certain point you can start to feel like, oh, I'm a little bit tired of this like hard driving, like clean eating at the gym, and so it does feel really good to just sometimes like take a day where it's like you unplug. I am just going to sit back and relax today, and I might have a Reese's peanut butter cup, and that is okay because tomorrow I'll be right back to my grind, right? So yeah, I've been there. I get it.
Oh my gosh, it's like you're reading my mind or something. That is my favorite chocolate.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Oh, there you go, soul sisters.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. And now earlier I was saying, 20 years ago, Michelle, but as I was doing the math as we were speaking, I'm like, more like 30 years ago, Michelle, which is right after college. I remember getting a credit card and I just
Mm,
thought, ooh, that is my ticket to freedom. I
right.
can do what I want when I want.
Yep.
Nobody can tell me nothing. And then at the time, I was still dancing professionally in New York and I had a part-time job. I could barely pay for my rent,
Yep.
but somehow I felt like going to shop on this credit card for
Yep.
a whole new wardrobe made sense. Again, 20-year-old Michelle
Yeah, yeah.
kind of sounds very wild to me right now at almost 50-year-old Michelle, but I just want to put myself in somebody else's shoes if they might be listening and might be thinking the same thing. Well, like, well, Michelle, you say blow off meal, so I'm gonna have a cheesecake for dessert. So, Coach Terry, blow off spending spree. I'm gonna
Yeah.
spend $500 at Nordstrom. Like,
Yeah.
how would you approach that? Like, how could I bring that back in and perhaps not spend that $500 at Nordstrom?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I'll just go on record too because, a lot of my story is I've been like in and out of debt multiple times. The last time that I got out of debt, my ex-husband and we had accumulated $200,000 in debt, and that did not include our house. So, I mean, it took us 6 years to pay that off. And the reason I really like to kind of tell the story behind that is because I was already working as a financial professional and still was living with credit cards being an extension of our income, right? And it was like, well, I don't have the money to pay for this now, but I sure do have a credit limit and I haven't hit the limit yet. So, and I think that what you're looking at is whether or not it's kind of like a problem that presents itself multiple times or when you can't pay the balance off at the end of the month or even in a reasonable time frame, right? Within like a month or two. And then when you start losing money to interest, that's when you have to look at it and kind of go, okay, am I just like spending outside of my means? And if so, that's going to have a lot of other trickle down effects, right? Because if you're spending more than you're earning, then chances are you're also not saving. And even sometimes people will justify, well, but I am saving money. And I'm like, but you're also paying interest on a credit card. So are we seeing the math here that like those two things are negating each other, right? So I think that really, again, it kind of comes down to you have, well, self-awareness. I think first of all, like if you're not self-aware, then this can be an uphill battle. And really, I want to work with clients who like recognize, okay, this has been going on. I know it's been going on and I need to stop or I need to change or something's got to change. And sometimes there can be, issues where there's, spending addiction, which of course then I'm going to refer that out to a professional. Like if there's certain situations where a therapist is going to be the best professional for you, then hands down, I will, provide that referral. But if you're just looking at, I don't know, I just went to the store and I just like blew $500 and I wasn't really thinking about it. It's like, okay, well, again, it was that your cheat meal? Was that one time where you kind of stepped off, or is this a pattern of behavior? And if so, what's the pattern intercept? So is it who you were with? Like, did something else happen that day that triggered this? Was there like a sale and you got an email notice? Because let's unsubscribe from those emails, So there's different things like that. And I think there's a ton of different tools that you can use with people. And honestly, one of the first tools that I will pull out for people if they are really having a hard time controlling their spending is I will just say you might just need to stop using credit cards. I'm not going to say close the accounts, put them in the freezer. No, but just get them out of your wallet and just only use a debit card. And that is because the psychology that has been proven with credit cards is number one, shopping is a dopamine rush too, right? Just like sugar. So there's a lot of psychology behind the impacts to your brain when you use credit cards versus like spending with cash, which I know a lot of us don't do that anymore. But I was telling this story to somebody recently. I said, think about it. When you use your debit card, you watch your bank account balance drop. When you use a credit card, you watch the balance increase. Now, like the numbers go in different directions. And somehow I really feel like that plays into the psychology of things too, because we just don't seem to get as stressed when the number is growing as when the dollars in the bank start dropping. So, I do think that if you need to just get credit cards out of the wallet and just switch to, using a debit card only until you start to, make sure that the shopping has been addressed. So, yeah, there's a lot of different tools that you can kind of pull out with that.
That is amazing. Already, as you were speaking, I have 2 friends that I will be sending your way as soon as we get off this call because they could definitely use even those 2 tools alone. So,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course, of course.
And as far as working with clients, I know in my programs, I say, let me work with you 30 days just to get some habits in place, but then it's up to you to keep the work going. And it's usually long term. And I look at long term goals. And with your work, do you do your work? Is it like we meet with you weekly? We meet with you yearly? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I do offer just a single session. So, if someone wants to meet with me just one time, that is something that I will offer. And what happens is I actually ask them to provide a lot of different information to me up front. So, not only do I want to know what does your typical spending look like, so I just kind of have them fill out a spending form, but then I also ask other, qualitative questions like, how confident are you that you could handle a financial emergency? How do you manage your money now, especially with couples if they have, 3 separate bank accounts, his, hers, and the combined one? I want to know how do they currently manage money? How many different accounts do they have? Because sometimes people have multiple bank accounts. And so if I'm working with them to help just organize, I need to know what they're doing now and what hasn't worked up to this point. So with that first initial session, they give me a lot of homework ahead of time, and then I just come in on that first session ready to go with a lot of questions, clarifying, and then I just have an action plan. And so I really gauge from them whether or not they feel like they're going to need help implementing the steps on the action plan. I'm sure some people, it's like once they get the information, they're like, I got this, and they're off and running. And that's great. But if someone feels like, this feels overwhelming, or I don't know, they're not confident in their ability, then I do offer a 3-month program. And so in that program, I work with someone once a week for the first month because I don't want them running into any hurdles and getting stuck. If they run into any problems, I'm like, let's make sure we're talking frequently so we can work through whatever that is. And then we just meet every 2 weeks for the next 2 months. And so that way it's like, again, we're getting systems in place, we're fine tuning. 3 months, sometimes a lot of like the ebbs and flows of money can happen during that time too, right? Like sometimes holidays will happen or vacations will happen, things that aren't normal spending. So it gives us an opportunity oftentimes to get to see, okay, how did that play out? What did that look like? Yeah. So a 3-month program is for those that really feel like they're going to need some extra support.
And it's also an extra level of accountability as well,
Mhm.
because I
Yeah.
can just, again, put myself in somebody else's shoes and say, "Oh, Coach Terry's paying attention, like,
Yeah.
maybe I don't need that extra latte next Saturday."
Oh, that's funny. But you know what? That's your awareness, right? And just like I
Yeah.
was talking about, like just having a level of awareness around what you feel like maybe you should change. That's way better than somebody telling you, you really shouldn't have caffeine, right? Because it lands differently when the idea is yours, when the incentive is yours, and I really feel like people are smart and resourceful, and I feel like they have their own answers. So really, I feel like a lot of what I do with clients is I just ask the right questions, because I just need you to kind of dig deep and figure out what it is that how are you going to solve this problem? Like what, and it's not that I'm going to let someone stumble along and not have an answer. If they need guidance, for sure that's what I'm here for. But I feel like oftentimes, you can just ask the right questions around, what happened there, or how did that make you feel when you went out and bought another latte, right? And you could just dig into that a little bit and kind of figure out it. There's a lot of touchy feely feelings involved as well.
That is so compassionate. And just the little bit that I know of you and that I continue to learn is that, yes, you have that compassion and you want to help, which I
Yeah.
think would help people feel more, what's the word? Probably safer. I
Yeah.
imagine people feel very safe being vulnerable with you because money can feel very vulnerable. I mean, a
It
lot of us
yeah,
are not grown up or raised to talk about money. And
yeah,
so
for sure.
being a full grown adult, you can feel like, either you're in control or I'm just going to talk to my partner about that. But talking to, quote unquote, stranger about money, that can feel very open and like
Yeah,
you're kind of naked. So I love that you,
yeah,
you have this compassionate approach.
absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there's no shame in acknowledging, kind of where you've been and what needs to change. I feel like as long as you are invested in your own personal growth, that is a win-win all the way around.
Mm, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, as we wind down, probably the biggest question I have is around, well, and then I have a fun personal question after this, but
Okay.
the biggest question around money is the word budget. I know
Mhm.
that can also be an inflammatory word for some.
Right.
I don't mind sharing. I have done a lot of work around that. And so I actually love having a budget now. I can
Yeah.
tell you 10 years into having a budget, sticking to the budget, it's something I look forward to.
Yeah.
And I'll also share before I let you talk is that having a spouse and having a weekly conversation with your spouse, like I
Mhm.
cannot recommend it enough. I learned that from Kate Northrup and Mike Watts and some of the work that they do. But ever since I started implementing it, like not only does it get Steve and I closer just as far as talking about our values, because I think our values do center a lot around money,
To
meaning I think the way you spend money shows a lot of what you value,
Right.
but also brings us closer because we can trust each other. Because it's like, oh, well, he knows if I'm spending money on this, it's because I either really need it or I really desire it, and vice
Yeah.
versa. Like just
Yeah.
having that open door conversation. I love that we have that. And
Yeah.
also, I'll add again, to use that word, fully grown adults, when Steve and I met 8 years ago, we did have our own pretty much everything, we had our own
Right.
properties, we had our own money, we had our own children, and bringing all that together, it did take a lot of conversation, and
Right.
I'm so grateful we were vulnerable in the beginning to do that because once we combined assets, like like compound
Yeah.
interest,
Yes.
it was like
Yes.
2 plus 2 did not equal 4. 2 plus 2 equaled like 10, which I'm like,
Yes.
thank
Yes.
you, God,
Yeah.
because we had
Right.
the trust, we had that extra level of accountability. And I also truly believe on the spiritual level, I think saying yes to each other and yes to being vulnerable definitely brought in that energy of, okay, I see that you can be responsible with this amount. Let's
Mhm.
continue to increase that.
Yeah.
So that is my like praise to the budget and praise to open communication and praise to being vulnerable around money. How do you approach the word budget?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for sharing that story because I do think that, when working with couples, like oftentimes the communication skills is also something that we need to work on because we often not only are a lot of us not taught anything about money, I think a lot of us are definitely not taught about proper communication either. And so I think that that's also kind of a skill that a lot of us need to either like hone, learn or practice frequently. So kudos to you two for doing that. I will say that, when it comes to budgeting, a lot of people think about the term budget as restrictive, and it does not need to be that. And, so really, here's the way that I generally approach it with people. I say a budget is just a plan. And if you're not going to stick to that plan anyway, then why would you budget? Right? Because that's really what it is. And so, what I advocate for is actually tracking your expenses. I'm way more
Mm.
concerned that you actually know what's happening than what you planned for. Because if you plan for something and you've never tracked your expenses, like the first time I ask a lot of my clients, tell me how much you typically spend, we later realized once they start tracking that those original numbers were way wrong. And it's like no wonder people feel like they fail when they're budgeting because they didn't really have an educated guess to begin with. So I feel like I'm more concerned that you're tracking your expenses or that you're at least, and you don't have to keep every receipt. Like I'm a receipt nerd. I get a receipt with every purchase that I make and
Love
I
it.
I
Same here.
document it and then I
Yep.
sync it with my bank account, and, like, if
Yep.
there's a penny off in my bank account, I will notice it. So,
I
but
know.
I know that I'm different in that way, and I don't expect my clients to be. We need a system that's going to work for you, and so whatever that is. And I will say that I think that sometimes it takes a lot of trial and error with folks to find a system that's gonna work for them. And I will say also too, because like I said, with a budget, that's just a plan and you've got to have a way to stick to the plan. So this is part of that, where I was talking about a lot of my clients do all their spending on a credit card and then just, pay it. But sometimes they're not paying it in full, but everything that goes from the bank account is just paid on the credit card. And so I'll say, okay, if we feel like we need to rein in the spending here, like just on groceries or dining out or something, let's just no longer use a credit card for that, right? Like let's maybe pull out some cash or just use a debit card only for that particular expense so that we can just be better paying attention to what's actually happening there. So, as long as people have a system for tracking what's happening, I feel like I'm more concerned with that than budgeting. I feel like budgeting is great once you get to a place where you're able to plan ahead because again, mentioned this briefly in the beginning too, but a lot of us have, there's birthdays, there's back to school time, there's, I mean obviously holidays and birthdays and things we can plan for. You can plan for back to school time, but a lot of times, we just have sometimes we get bumps in income, sometimes we have bumps in expenses, and these things are not level all the time. So really getting organized and planning ahead is sort of like an advanced skill set that my clients will get to a little bit later. It's not always right away that people get to that like advanced planning organization, but once you get that dialed in, it can really be super empowering, right? I'm like you. I love budgeting now. I do it every single month. At the end of the month, I just look ahead to what's coming and then I've got it documented and I know, and I also save first before I spend. So,
Yes.
there's
Yes,
just
yes, yes.
little hacks like that, right? So, yeah, I do think tracking is more important than budgeting.
Nicely done. And thank you for sharing that. That makes all the sense in the world. And again, I love that you focus on the behavior first. And so they know that that leads to more empowerment. And then
Yeah,
once you feel empowered, then it does feel fun to create
yeah.
the budget or wink, wink, do the meal planning.
Right.
So I love that. You were
Yes,
speaking my
yeah.
language. Well, sweet. As we wrap up, a question I love to ask my guests, just to bring it back to nutrition.
Yeah.
Could you share one of your favorite memories as a child in the kitchen?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is a two-part answer maybe, 'cause
Oh, yay, bring it.
I was gonna immediately jump to I had a next door neighbor that taught me how to decorate cakes when I was, like, 10 years old, and that led to a very, very long career of being in the cake industry. So I used to have my own cake business also. I did a lot of weddings anyway, so but that was
Amazing.
something that, like, my neighbor actually instilled in me, and I mean, that was, like, over 30 years of really doing cakes, and I do still love that. But I would say one this is kind of a funny thing, but, we grew up not very close to our extended family, but I do remember one time when my grandma had come out to visit, she just taught me how to make scrambled eggs, and I just feel like that was one of very few moments where it was like I was in the kitchen with someone learning something, and I was, very young at that time, but that is still really an impactful memory.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, okay, and where can my audience find you if they wanna learn more?
Yeah, thank you. So you can, of course, find me on all the social platforms, which are all linked on my website as well, which is terislater.com. And I will also say that right at the top of my website, I do have a money personality quiz. That's a super fun, who doesn't love a quiz, right? But this one's very, very psychology backed. So it's not just some fun internet quiz that I made up. It's based on a lot of psychology around money. But if you do take that personality quiz, not only do you get, a big PDF of your results, but I will also offer a call with me to kind of dive in and talk about it. And that's no charge at all. I think it's really fun to kind of look at that and figure out for people, what surprised you. And also, how does your personality impact the way that you are with money and how you handle money as well?
Oh, that is incredibly generous of you. I will be sure to put all those links in our show notes so that my community can come find you and get enriched with their financial plan as they are being enriched with their nutrition plan. Because as we know, whole person health. I know
Absolutely.
you're one of my soul sisters in that belief that
Yeah.
one contributes to the other, contributes to the other, contributes to the other.
Absolutely,
Big circle of
absolutely.
health.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Well, Coach Terry, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I am so excited to have you and to be able to call you a friend. And I look forward to getting to know you even better as time moves on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. This has been so great, and I look forward to seeing you again too.
Thanks so much for listening to Healthy, Sexy Nutrition. Have you been driving, doing laundry, or walking around the neighborhood? Sweet. I've got show notes on my podcast page at michellefox.com. Click over there when you are ready. On the page, you will find resources to support what you just learned on today's show. And you can grab some health supportive freebies as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please share a review on whichever podcast platform you are listening on. It will help us with our mission to build healthier communities, and your support would mean the world to me. If you have feedback on how we can improve, then of course, send an email to hello@michellefox.com and let us know. Big love from your favorite culinary nutritionist and health coach. Until next week, keep showing up for yourself and know that you and your health matter. You deserve to live in a body and have a life that you love.